Now to our first discussion. As preparations for the 2023 elections continue to gather momentum, Nigerians are desirous to have a government and a leader that would address the multitude of problems in the country, as there is a sense of, many would say, hopelessness and despair, exacerbated by current macroeconomic challenges ranging from rising inflation rates and, of course, which is eroding the purchasing power of the poor masses. Insecurity, which is fueled partly by deepening poverty, has taken a turn from the worst and has upended livelihoods and businesses, as well as deterred foreign investment into the country. Although the general elections has neither been contested nor won, analysts are concerned about the style of leadership of the next president, particularly in relation to the economy. However, they believe that getting the right personnel to advise whosoever emerges as president on how to steer the ship of Nigeria from its current economic challenges should be one of the major concerns of the presidential candidates. Well, joining me now virtually to set an economic agenda for the various presidential candidates ahead of the 2023 presidential elections. I'm being joined by the chief economist and partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Dr. Andrew Nevin. Thank you so much, Dr. Nevin. It's good to have you start the week with us on the show.
It always makes for a great week, Tolo, when I started with you. So thank you so much for having me today.
Yes, Nigeria is faced with series of challenges at this time. We can go on and on if we are to identify them one after the other. But the issue of insecurity is one that many would say is affecting businesses, and of course we affect investors' confidence across the country. What do you think should be running through the minds of whoever becomes the president, whoever becomes the CEO of Nigeria in 2023, before we go into some basics?
Well, I mean, we all understand the economic challenges and some of the policy choices that need to be made. But I think the other thing that's happened in the nation is that there's a recognition that above all of these things is the security issue. It doesn't matter what other economic policies you have, if the nation doesn't address the insecurity challenges and make some progress, then the other things aren't going to make a difference. So we put that is number one on the agenda. And those who listen to me speak know I'm not a security expert. I don't really comment on the direction other than say that it needs to be addressed. But I mean, one area where it's just critical and really hurting the nation, really hurting the bottom of the pyramid is in food security. So what's happening with this insecurity is that the total number of hectares being planted is reduced. People want to plant closer. To the extent they plant at all, they plant closer to their home and don't go to the further fields. They lie fallow. And so we're not getting enough food, so the price of food rises. And it's a real tragedy. So I guess to the extent I ever give advice, which I'd seldom do to the political masters in Nigeria, I would say to the incoming, His Excellency the President, please, it's for all purposes, we all understand security has to be the absolute top of the agenda. Then once that's addressed and there's a policy framework in place that's making progress, we can then talk about some of the other economic challenges we face.
Okay. Let's start to focus on sectors now, and I want to start with the power sector. We've heard of megawatts there. We're going to get this number of megawatts, and we're still over around 4,000 to 5,000 megawatts. What more can be done? That sector is already unbundled. But what more can be done? Let me use this word, open up that space for investment. If we don't have investment in the power sector, we cannot have improved supply. So how can we make that sector attractive and attract investment?
Well, I think one of the myths in Nigeria, of course, is that we only have 4,000 to 5,000 megawatts of power. Of course, we have, I believe, it's somewhere between 15 and 20,000 megawatts of power. It's just that the power is generated off the grid. So it shows Nigerians are very good at organizing power when it's necessary. And in some cases, obviously, diesel is inefficient, it's expensive, and environmentally unsound. But we also have other power, waste to power, for example, more and more solar that's coming through. So that's good power for the nation. So I guess one piece of economic advice would be we could decentralize power. There's no reason to think that power needs to be a national issue. If I use my own country, Canada, we have provinces with as few as 1 million people who run their own power situation. And I have no doubt that the states, if given the the tools to decide their own power strategy would decide it. And to the extent that you need cooperation across state grids, say, there'll be that cooperation. The United States shows that as well. So I would suggest humbly that perhaps we should have a decentralization of it. I mean, I was, of course, in the country in the unbundling. I remember the privatization. I was optimistic. It's not my own sector. I serve financial services groups, but I was optimistic that it would work. But you look at the result as not being positive for the nation. So why don't we try a different direction? There are many, many states that can figure out power on their own. Lagos is already, I think, down that path as well. So that's my humble suggestion for this afternoon.
Beautiful stuff. Let's look at the agricultural space. We've seen the support or focus and interventions, initiatives by the Central Bank of Nigeria. The most recent AFDB is also saying that it's going to support African countries to address food shortage, considering what is happening Russia and Ukraine crisis. Now, with the vast land that we have in this country, many will say that the positives of these interventions are yet to be felt by Nigerians because the price of food remains on the high side. What can we do more to take advantage of this space that we have in the agricultural sector?
Well, let me say first, I think real credit to the Central Bank of Nigeria and the governor, and of course the previous governor, His Royal Highness Mohammed Sanusi II. They really put agriculture on the map. Before Governor Sanusi, it was really not really thought much about in Nigeria. I mean, it's been a long decade since this has happened, or more than a decade. I think we've made a lot of progress. There are a lot of private sector actors who are doing really amazing things in agriculture, using technology. I'll cite Affex, for example, the commodity exchange, I think has made a lot of progress on there. So it has been coming. And this idea, for example, of being able to export the big 5 crops, the aggregation of them, the quality control, setting up agricultural export processing centers is happening around the country. It's particularly, say, in Edo State, I'll cite. So it's happening. But again, I really feel like the last 2 or 3 years, the security issue has meant that this progress hasn't manifested itself in more food, which is ultimately what we're more food for Nigerians and more food exported out of the big 5 export crops. So unless we address the security issue, we're not going to get the benefits of agriculture. But I think that if we make progress on security, I actually have no doubt at this point in time there's enough focus both from the state sector, for the federal government, at individual states, individual private sector actors working together, a lot of coordination would make huge progress. But while farmers aren't prepared to go out to their fields because they're insecure and danger to their lives, it's not going to happen. So that has to be the top of the agenda, and then I think agriculture will take care of itself.
Looking at the financial space, it seems we have a little bit of stability with regards to our banking sector. The figures coming out, shows that the banking sector are doing very well. Even their shares remain the most liquid shares in the stock market. But what more can be done to also further strengthen the confidence in that space? A lot of conversations there, and government surely has a role to play in this. So what more can we be looking at, maybe short, medium, and long term for the financial space?
Yeah, so I think that the banking sector, which of course, as I said, my main role at PwC is serving financial services clients. The banking sector is very strong in Nigeria. Improvements in governance, improvements in technology. I can tell you, working with the management of many, many banks, I mean, they really are very well run. But I think that for the country as a whole, what's more important at this stage is asset management and the securities industry. So we have a very good banking sector, which I think you could argue is the best banking sector in Africa. And it continues to make progress. But a couple of things that would really help us if we also saw the same thing happening on the securities side. So we don't have enough listed stocks, we don't have enough listed bonds, we don't have enough retail investors. I mean, that's how we accumulate capital. We need capital. And people often come out and say the banks are not lending or they're not putting in long-term capital. But that's not the bank's role. The banks have short-term deposits, short-term liabilities, so they have to have relatively short-term assets, longer-term assets, infrastructure assets, for example, or telecommunications assets, or mining assets, oil and gas assets are longer term, and we need more of the capital markets. So what I'd like to see is more focus from the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning on developing and working with SEC to develop the capital markets so that they're equal to the banking sector. And simultaneously, of course, once the asset management or the securities market develops, we'll also see insurance get developed, because of course insurance only works if they have somewhere to invest the funds. So insurance and asset management in the country are undersized relative to the economy and the potential, and they both need to grow. So I would focus the efforts there, not so much the banking in its sense is taking care of itself. And of course, you've seen banks, a number of the banks recognize the criticality of the asset management business. So we've seen a number of banks now go to the holding company structure so they can have other businesses. And one of the prime businesses they want to participate in is asset management. So that would be my advice to the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning.
Great stuff. Dr. Nevin, let's go to the oil and gas, or move to the oil and gas industry, which of course remains very strategic, a very interesting sector to always talk about. We've seen the PIA after many years being passed into law, and a lot of positives being expected from this, despite the fact that we couldn't take out subsidy. We have 18 months for the to hold on to that before we get full implementation. But we seem not to be attracting enough investments into that space, despite what we have as a country, particularly gas. What do you think the new administration should focus on in the oil and gas space?
Yeah, so I think, obviously the PIA took, 2 decades to be passed. And of course, now we're in a phase in the world where we want to wind down hydrocarbons. So maybe we're too late. But I think that a couple of positives here. For one, the federal government recognized about 2 or 3 years ago that really Nigeria should be a gas country, not an oil country. And I think that's a really important step forward for many reasons. But of course, we continue to be a very difficult environment to attract capital for all the reasons we understand, particularly high capital intensive industries like the gas industry. On the other hand, as tragic as it is, the war in the Ukraine has given the country a unique opportunity, because obviously Europe and particularly Germany have had to rethink their energy strategy. We became so reliant on Russian gas. We find ourselves where we are in the world. They can't rely on it. They need to go off of it. So maybe there's a chance, I think there is definitely a chance at this point in time for Nigeria to be stepping forward on the world stage with Europe, saying, look, we understand, we haven't necessarily been a great investment environment, but you need the gas. We have the gas. We already export a significant amount. We're on train 7 at LNG. Please help us with an accelerated investment program to bring that gas exports up. And in the course of making those investments, of course, we'll also be using more gas for domestic use. But we really have to focus on gas and take advantage of the world circumstances to get this investment, which is in the billions of dollars we wouldn't otherwise get. I was quite pessimistic about the gas investments needed prior to the Ukraine war. But right now, number one thing for the administration today and then the future administration should be talking to the Europeans at how do we accelerate it and get the necessary investment and safeguards in there to get the gas up, help Europe with its energy security problem, and help us really become a gas economy.
Let's talk about export for survival. We need to shift away that focus on importing. We see our import bill keeps rising, and petroleum products seems to be on the high side of that way, but that's not where I'm actually going. Talking about exports, we've seen a lot of efforts by the Nigerian Export Promotion Council to try and improve exports in Nigeria, but many say we need to add value to what we export. So if you were to be to advise the president or whoever becomes the president, what more should be done at promoting exports so that we can earn more foreign exchange to address the shortfall in that area? That's a big talk when we talk about the forex challenge that we face as a country.
PwC's views on this, I think, are starting to be well known. We've been very clear for 2 or 3 years we should be exporting grains. So we already export grains through the diaspora. The remittances from the diaspora are enormous. 25 billion in official terms, I think, this year, probably much more from unofficial channels. And that's what we should be exporting. The difference today is with COVID and with the technology, we can export grains without people leaving Nigeria. So those high value added service exports are what we would like to see the country focus on. And one of the reasons for it is our infrastructure is not sufficient for us to be competitive in low-end manufacturing. So if you think of the traditional development path of a country like Vietnam or China or Korea, they started in low-end manufacturing and moved up the value chain. So economists have come to Nigeria and said that's how we should develop. We completely disagree. We already export brains. Brains are the highest value-added thing, and you can now do it remotely. So we can have coders, we can have business process outsourcing, and earn billions of dollars with that. So that's the number one export strategy for us, because as I said, we're not competitive in low-end manufacturing. Very frustrating to try to do that. The second thing that we should be thinking about is, of course, the classic import substitution. But again, I don't think that import substitution, our view is import substitution for low-end goods is not very helpful for the country. What is really helpful is import substitution on very expensive things, which are health and education. So, I estimate, I don't have a huge number of facts, there's so much in the informal economy, but there's probably about $3 billion a year that we import in health and education. So this is people go abroad for medical care, people go abroad for education. If we want to reduce our import, when they go abroad, that's an import from the respect of the Nigerian economy. So, how do we address this? Well, let's focus on improving health and education so people don't have to go abroad. That would be a better economic strategy than trying to, manufacture, for example, low-end table fan or appliances or small plastic things that are manufactured inexpensively around the world. The third export strategy is the agricultural crops. So the big five, if I can remember them on live television. So cashews, cassava, cocoa, sesame, and one other that'll come to me in palm oil. So those big five are the ones where we have a comparative advantage. As I said, we need the export processing zones to make sure that we have the infrastructure and the quality systems to be able to do that. So that's the other area. So that's where I would focus on export Nigerian grains into high value, global value chains, high value added global value chains, import substitute on education and health, and export the five cash crops, the five big cash crops where I have a comparative advantage. I would not focus at all on trying to, from a government policy perspective, focus on trying to export, as I said, low-end manufacturing, because we will not be competitive for a very long time.
Finally, before I let you go, let's talk about poverty reduction. A lot of initiatives focused on bringing, I think, 100 million people away from poverty moving on in the years. Now, what do you think should be the principle, or what should be done to achieve this? If not 100%, 60, 70%.
Well, I think that, first let's give credit to this administration, His Excellency President Buhari administration. We really have had a genuine focus, I think, on poverty reduction. For reasons we've discussed, have not necessarily made as much progress as we would like. But again, first off, I think the programs, there are many programs, increasing number of programs to invest in young people and upskilling, and this includes not just, so for example, taking a university graduate and giving them employability skills, but also includes things like coding for employment, BPO training, so they can fit into these global value chains. At the same time, we also need upskilling around vocational skills, so TVET, so auto mechanics, building, etc. So equipping the young people, but then some economic changes that we need to accelerate the economy. I mean, some of the distortions do need to go. I understand why it's very difficult in an election year to eliminate, for example, the foil subsidy. I understand why the currency distortions would be difficult to close, but I mean, we need to be moving in that direction and get our growth rate up to 6 to 8%. So if we had investing in young people, particularly around things that they can sell in the global stage, or TVET, and we simultaneously kind of eliminated some of these subsidies, continued the good work of Quebec on the ease of doing business, and continue to have more state-led economic development. Again, I'll cite Edo State. I think His Excellency the governor there is doing, Obaseki is doing an absolutely fantastic job. In fact, on the dimensions I'm talking about, so he's investing in exporting Nigerian grains through coding for employment and business process outsourcing. He's investing in the agricultural exports and agricultural processing. And he's also investing in health and education. So the three big areas that I say. So if we see more state governors also going in that direction, I think it will make a big difference. So I think we all understand it's been a very difficult 7, 8 years on that. We haven't achieved what we thought. But I continue to be optimistic. I continue to see many good things, particularly around young people. and around some very good governors that are doing the right thing, and some very good groups within the federal government. I know the civil service takes a lot of criticism, but when I look at PAMEC, when I look at NSIA, when I look at the CBN, look at the Federal Ministry of Budget, Finance, Budget, and National Planning, groups that I work with, I mean, you really see some high quality thinking there in difficult circumstances. So I continue to be optimistic. I think that once we get over the election, we give a chance to make some of these harder decisions that have really hampered us, like the foil subsidy, 4 trillion naira, maybe more this year going on that. That's not sustainable. So that's the direction of travel I'd like to see. And of course, we have His Excellency Governor Tinubu and His Excellency Governor Obi, who both being governors of very high-performing states and would kind of, I think, go in the directions I've talked about. And of course, during the period of when His Excellency Vice President Atiku was in office, the nation made a lot of progress. I arrived just at the tail end of that. So I'm optimistic we'll come into 2023, hopefully a peaceful transition of power, and we're ready to have a very good run from there.
I want to thank you so much for your time, Dr. Andrew Nevin, who's the Chief Economist and Partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. He joined us live from Canada. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Tolo. Stay safe.
All right, you too.